So today we are going to learn phonetics. So it is important to understand what is the term phonetics means. Phonetics is actually the study of sounds of human speech. So it is actually a branch of linguistics, which mainly focus more on the sounds, the pronunciation, the stress or the accent, the phonemes, morphology. So there are so much of categorization under the discipline called phonetics. But phonetics is ultimately comes under the branch of linguistic, which is again an interdisciplinary science. We call it a science because we are going to focus on measurement or the accuracy or the precision under this particular term, which is phonetics, or in this under this discipline called phonetics. Also need to understand that this term phonetics also means that it actually talks about the interaction of different vocal organs. When we say vocal organs, like the lips, tongue, uvula, then we need to understand teeth, lips. So, like the vocal organs mainly are all this larynx and all this are the main focus in this particular discipline because how we use the sound, because all this helps in the production of sound, because the way we measure it, where we use it with an accuracy that actually helps in the right and the correct pronunciation of the word, or pronunciation of different sounds. And this is what we call the production of speech. Another important one is that this we are measured under the standard discipline created, or a discipline called the International Phonetic Alphabet. It is actually a framework that uses a single syllable to describe a particular sound in a particular language, and we can find that all these are easily found in any of the dictionaries and in textbooks. So we are actually focused on that syllables, on this particular pronunciation of the words with a measured quantity of air passage. So this is what we are going to analyze in phonetics. And uh, under this section, what in this particular class, what we are mainly focusing on is actually the word accent. What is this word accent? This is what we are going to focus on. This is uh, uh, can otherwise be asked as like the stress. The stress, not in the daily way we say that, okay, I'm stressed completely. That's not the stress which we are focusing on in this. The stress here means the phonetic language of or the phonetic script of emphasizing a syllable as per the usage of air passage. That's what we call it, the stress. So in phonetics, you need to understand that the word stress, it means a greater force, um, that how you pronounce a particular syllable as per the when we say syllable, it is actually a part of the word which contains a vowel in it. I'll give an example for this, like for example, the word fantastic. Okay, if I'm using the word fantastic, I say there are three syllables in it. So now the question is, how can I determine that there are three syllables in this? How is that possible? The best way to understand this is that, as I mentioned, you understand this, right? The part of the word which contains one vowel sound. So you can identify the vowel sounds here. This has one vowel sound, this is again another vowel sound, and this is another vowel sound, right? So now when we divide this, it becomes three syllables, right? Fantastic. So now this is the way we are going to apply the syllable. So this is a three syllabic word. But again, you need to understand that this is a formula which we cannot apply it in all words and letters. It, as per the usage, we have to determine where to use it. Why I'm saying this, this is a three-letter syllable. But if I give another example, like colonize, in the word colonize again, as per the above given example, like you need to identify the vowel sound. You know that this is a vowel, this is again a vowel, this is again a vowel, and this is again a vowel. So in this word there are four vowels. So we usually will divide this way. So it's a four-letter syllable, but it's wrong. This is actually a third-letter syllable because the last colonize, right? So this will we are using it in the form of diphthong, in the form of this. So it becomes a three-letter alphabet. It's a three-syllabic word. So this is what the phonetic script. As per the phonetic script, we are dividing this into syllables. So according to the syllable, we have to apply the term stress. So now what is the objective here? The accent is very much important because in order to make the speech intelligible, we are using accent. Uh, it is also helpful for us because it helps us in measuring the sound as per a particular pattern. So that way also phonetics is actually helping us to measure the quantity and the production of the sound. So now another example to justify this is that the word carrier and carrier, these are two different words. We know that there is very slight difference with it. When we see the word, we know that it's very easy to identify it. Like there is a difference. Even the meaning, with regard to the meaning also, it is entirely different. And the carrier means a professional carrier, and also the carrier means the luggage here. So there is entirely a difference and a distinction between these two words. But when we pronounce it, it sounds the same. That's where the problem comes. But how can we solve this problem? Because in the first one, carrier, that's actually the stress is on the second syllable. So car is actually less stressed and the stress is on the rear, carrier, right? And R is silent here. And when it comes to carrier, so the stress is on the first syllable, which is a carrier. So carrier and carrier and also carrier. So carrier and carrier, this is the way we need to pronounce. So when we pronounce it correctly, the distinction and the differentiation will be far better if we use the stress. So that we know that where to use the stress accordingly the pronunciation, you can find the difference. Now we go more into this term, what stress means. The term stress can be divided into two, like the primary stress and the secondary stress. So now the question is, what are these stress? Like primary stress and the secondary stress. The primary stress means that the stress is on. Stress means we mark the stress like a quote. It's not a double quote, it's a single quote. It's sort of single quote. I'm just saying it's actually a line, a straight small line. That's what we call it, the stress. So this mark will be on the top of the syllable in a word that indicates that it's a primary syllable. As I mentioned, the word fantastic. So here we need to identify where to put the stress. So you can easily identify the stress is here. This is what a stress. We call it a stress because it's on the second syllable. So fantastic. So that's the primary stress. But now the question is, what is the secondary stress? So the secondary stress means the stress again, it also focus on the stress, but the stress here is on the uh, is not on the top. We place the stress not on the top of the syllable, but on the lowered section or on the lowered vertical line. That's where we apply the secondary stress. So in this case, we can see that if we give the example delegate, this we know that the word in both the cases, the word delegate is the same because previously carrier and carrier, In those, at least the spelling is entirely different. But here the delegate and the delegate, it seems the same, right? But even the pronunciation also is the same. But how it differs, because when we add the stress, then we can understand that there will be a clear differentiation in the pronunciation. But there is a difference here. It is here we have to use a lowered vertical line to imply what a secondary stress means. So it can be divided into, like, the verb, which is again we can say that uh, uh, like depending on the function of a word in a particular sentence, accordingly we can determine what whether you have to put the secondary stress or the primary stress. So one method is that if you can understand that this is primary stress, or because if it's a verb, then we follow the secondary stress. If you are using this word in a sentence as a noun or an adjective, then we can use the primary stress here. So that is one method to understand it. That means as per the function of the word in a sentence, accordingly we can determine whether the word whether we have to use the secondary stress or we have to use the primary stress. So the example here is that you have to delegate your responsibilities. So delegate here is used as a coordination of different activities, so you have to delegate. It's an action word here. So the word delegate is used here as an action word. So it's used here as a verb in short. So the significance here is that the delegate is used here as a verb, but the stress to use here as the secondary stress. So this is an example for this. You can understand that here this law word longboard. I'll just try to zoom it so that you'll be able to understand. This longboard uh, vertical line, this is known as a secondary stress. But in this case, in the first case, you can understand that the delegate is used here as a noun. That means we elected a delegate to the national committee. So the delegate here in the second is used as a noun. So the pressure or the friction is on the first syllable, which is the. So this is the primary stress. So the first one is the secondary stress and the next one it is a primary stress. So this is the way, this is what the stress means. The stress can be divided into two, the primary stress and the secondary stress. In the primary stress, we are actually signifying the function of the word in a sentence. Like the word delegate is used here as an action word or a verb, so we are applying or implying the word secondary stress here. But in the second case, the word delegate is used here as a noun and hence the primary stress on the first syllable. Moving further to the next one, there are certain rules to it. Because we cannot, because we said it's already a kind of science, right? So when we say science, it's important to understand that it has certain rules. So there are rules, but before that, we just try to go to certain examples like a two-syllable words. If you are using a two-syllable word and a three-syllable word and a four-syllable word, how the stress differs. That's what we are going to identify here. So in the first case, the second two-syllable word, but the stress is on the first syllable because able. Because when we say, how can we identify it? Because when we pronounce a word, how the air is uh, flowing, or how we are pushing the air out, how we are releasing the air. So if the air is going in a linear direction, we know that this is one. This is a syllable. So here we know that it's a two-syllable word: able, answer, action, bangle. So all these are two-syllable words, but the emphasis is on the first syllable, and here accordingly we put the stress on the first syllable. And in the second example, again it's a two syllable words like about, again, behave. in all those actually though we know that it's a the stress is on the second syllable, but you need to understand that in this we are actually using this word according to the sound. So about, so b, before pronouncing the word be, we are stressing it. Like behave. So her, that sound, H requires more friction to pronounce it. So there we put the stress. Like again, so A is comparatively silent and weak here in this, and use G requires more friction here. So the second syllable is highlighted. Again, let's move to the third syllable, beautiful, beautiful. So here in this context, you can find that because when you pronounce a word beautiful, there is no lag in the air. The air is going very smoothly and there is no pauses in between. So it's easy to understand that there is no friction. We are not using friction. We are using friction in the beginning of the pronunciation, like the beautiful, confident. So confident. So confident, we are not stressing for there. It's confident. So in the beginning, C requires more friction in this case. Again, difficult. So D requires more pressure. So the stress is on the first syllable, which is the first syllable of the third, because it's a three-syllabic word, right? But the stress is on the first syllable. Beautiful, confident, difficult, holiday. This again, where it's take another example. In this case, again, we can understand that the stress is on the second syllable because attention, okay, attention, behavior, connection, condition. So the stress is on the second syllable. So this is what we call the stress request. Again, this is a three-syllabic word, attention, behavior, connection, and condition. Right? So there is it's a three-syllabic word, but the stress is on the second syllable in this case. Again, let's move to another example, like where the stress is on the third syllable. So again, this is a three-syllabic word, afternoon, or disappear, engineer, souvenir, right? So in this case, the stress is on the third syllable because after after that, when we pronounce noon, the stress is on the word on the letter N. And again, when we say disappear, this is again a three-letter syllable, disappear, and the stress is on the third syllable, which is on P, the second P, not on the first P, because first P comes under the second syllable. And when we say the word engineer, so the stress is on the third syllable, and especially because N G near. No, no sound requires more stress, and it's here the on the third syllable we are stressing using the word stress. When we take the same example on four-syllabic word, again we can find that in this four-syllabic word, it's the term here is intelligence. We know that it's very clear that when I pronounce the word intelligence, so the ter requires more stress. Again, this is a four-syllabic word, intelligence, right? Particular, particular. Then catastrophe. Again, philosophy, right? It's a four-syllable word, and the stress is on the second syllable of the four-syllabic word, like intelligence, particular, catastrophe, and philosophy. Okay, it's not philosophy, it's philosophy, right? For now, again, we have more examples like this, like electricity and all. Again, these are all four and five syllabic words. I'm not going into those examples, but I hope it's clear to you. Now, let's focus on the rules. There are certain rules which we have to follow when it comes to stress or the accent. Because then as I mentioned in the beginning, that the same formula we cannot apply equally to all the words. It's not as per the situation, as per the usage of that particular word in a sentence. Accordingly, we have to determine where to stress it. So, because the word or the word seems similar, but the pronunciation differs. So, how can we differ the pronunciation? Based on the stress. Where we are applying the stress, accordingly, we'll be able to understand where to pronounce it and how to produce a sound accordingly. So in a two syllabic words, for example, how we have to determine it. So the rule number one says that the stress we have to use the stress in a two syllabic word. It completely depends upon the function of it. As I mentioned, one example we have already done it before. The delegate, right? The word delegate. Delegate we used one as an verb, another one we use as a noun. So accordingly, we give the stress like the primary stress and the secondary stress. In this case also, it's almost the same like because it talks about like how to use the stress. But here again, you need to first identify in which way the word is used in a sentence, whether it is used as a verb or whether it is used as a noun or an adjective in this context. Accordingly, we have to determine. But you have to remember this formula by saying that if it is a noun or an adjective, the stress is on the first syllable. But if it is a verb, then the stress is on the second syllable. So you can remember again the if it is a noun or an adjective, the stress is on the first syllable, or if it is a verb, the stress is on the second syllable. Okay, this is one example. Like if you are using it as a word, noun like absent, the stress is on the first syllable. If you're using it as a verb, the stress is on the second syllable. Again, conflict, using it as a verb, sorry, noun, then the stress is on the first syllable. If you're using it as a verb, the stress is on the second syllable. Conflict. Again, if you are using the word convert as a noun, then the stress is on the first syllable. And if you're using the word as a verb, then it is on the second syllable. Same applies to all, like extract the stress. If you are using it as a noun, the word used on the stress is on the first syllable, and if you are using it as a verb, the stress is on the second syllable. Okay, I hope this is clear. Let's move to the rule number two. The rule number two talks about the prefix. Okay, so prefix, usually the prefixes are weak because there are strong and weak sounds. So here, most of the prefixes are weak. They are silent. I mean, like we cannot say it's completely silent. The silent is not the accurate word here. Weak is the word which we use. So, for example, when you pronounce a word arise, so a is getting very less force of air to pronounce but rise R requires more stress because arise. So the word arise, it's very clear that this is a two syllable word, rise, because a itself is so. But here, it's important to understand that the a is used here as as a prefix. So we need to emphasize the root word. The root word here is rise. Like in another one, lawn is a root word, and a is used here as a prefix, a weak prefix. Again, the another word which is below, law is a word, and we know that the B is used here as a weak prefix. Again, become in the word become, come is the root word, and B is used as a weak prefix. So the second rule says that if you're using a weak prefix before the root word, the stress is on the root word, not on the prefix. Okay, so this is what this rule number two says. Let's move to the rule number three. What the rule number three talks about. Rule number three says that if it's a two-syllable word, again, this is again about the prefix, but the prefix here is dis. Okay, dis is used in many circumstances as a prefix. For example, dismay, disgrace, disclose, discount. These are all, uh, you know, mm, In all these words, we can understand that this is used here as a prefix to the root word, which is make, grace, close, count. Because how can you determine that this is a prefix? Because this root word is independent in itself. This conveys a meaning, right? Make, grace, close, count. These are independent words. This gives you a sense of meaning, right? So these are the root words, and we are using this in front of it as a prefix. So again, in this rule number three, we can understand that when we are using the word discount, this word we are using it every time, right? When we go to a mall, when we go to a shop, the first thing when we before we buy, what is the discount for this? How much will discount you will pay, give us, right? So the word discount is very common, right? So in this word, actually, this is the prefix and count is a root word, and in this case, again, you need to remember that the second word, that means a root word, will gets the stress. Okay, it's like not on this, it's on the root word, which is count. Before count, we put the stress. It's almost similar to rule number two, and it's a very minor difference with the difference with regard to. But here, it's not as this is not a weak prefix actually. But when it comes to a rise alone, we can find that that's weak prefix. But this is actually the requires so much, are getting so much of pressure and so much of space when we pronounce it. But because the next word following it is count, which is the root word, so the emphasis is on the second syllable, or the word count or close or grace or may. Now let's move to the next rule, which is rule number four. In this rule number four and rule number five, it sounds almost similar, but there is a difference. I'll tell you that. But before that, let's focus on this. This is regarding the two-syllable word. In this two-syllable word, if you are using, previously we were talking about the prefix, right? In this case, rule number four and rule number five, we are going to talk about the suffix here. Suffix means after the root word, we are adding a word which is as a suffix. For example, narrate or chastise, attract, depict. So all these are actually the suffix. So it's clearly given here which are the the suffixes. So ATE, ISE, IZE, or CT. These are certain suffixes. So now when we use this word as a suffix, where to put the syllable? So we need to put the syllable on the last because we divide the word into syllables, right? So in the last syllable, we have to apply this stress. If it's a two syllable, we are not talking about the third syllable, okay? We're talking about if it's a two syllable word like narrate or migrate, debate, chastise, comprise, capsize, attract, connect, depict. It's two syllable word. It's clearly easy to understand. But the stress is on the last syllable. That means the second syllable. So that is what rule number four says. But as previously, as I mentioned, rule number four and rule number five is closely related. So rule number five actually talks about almost a similar thing, but again it talks about not about the two syllable, but about the three syllable word. You remember in the beginning I said the word colonize, right? Which is a three syllable word. Colonize. Complicate. Separate. Justify. Classify. So, when again these are all suffixes again like ATE, ISE, IZE, IFY. These are all suffixes. When we use a suffix towards the end of the word, like a classify, justify, when all the words, it's not here as a suffix, sorry, not here as a suffix. We are using these words to, or the word ends with this particular tone. So it's not a suffix, sorry, previously I talked about the suffix. The suffix we are going to talk later in rule number six. So 4 and 5 is actually talking about the word that ends with these words like AT, ISE, IZE, and IFY. classify, justify, then colonize, brutalize, complicate, and separate. So when in this words, when we say another word also, though it's a three-syllable word, but you see how the air is flowing. It's having a linear flow of air. It shows that the stress is on the first syllable, not on any other syllables. So, like complicate or separate or colonize, and these words you can see the flow of air is very linear, so it actually shows that the stress is on the first syllable. But in the previous one, rule number 4 says that if it's a two-letter word, it's a two syllabic word, then the stress is on the second syllable. But in this case, if it's a three syllabic word, the stress is on the first syllable. So this is what rule number 5 says. Now let's see what the rule number 6 says. The rule number 6, here comes the suffix. So I made a mistake before because it's not about the suffix, it talks about the words ending with ing or ify, ct. But here we are going to use the suffix. But again, we know that the suffix is divided here as inflectional suffix and also the derivational suffix. The inflectional suffix means the words ends with es, or when you add es to a word, or when you add ing to a root word, or when you add ed to a word, that becomes the inflectional suffix. But on the other hand, when you use a word derivational suffix like when you add ag to a word, or ance to a word, or or ess, like distress, beautiful. So these words, like if you when you use ful to the end of the word, or Robin Hood, like hood, brotherhood or motherhood. That hood is an addition, right, which is a suffix, which we call it the derivational suffix. So when you use these kind of words, so you might ask why I'm saying all this. The rule number 6 says that when we add these suffix to the root word, it's not going to change the pronunciation. The pronunciation is almost the same. Yes, of course, when we add, like for example, begin, when it transforms to beginning when we add ing to it, right? That sounds matters, yes, but the stress is the same. Like if you, for example, if you see this, the stress is on the second syllable, and even though here also when you add suffix to it, again the stress is on the second syllable only. There is no change. You don't need to change the stress. Okay, for example, here love is again a one syllabic word. Okay, so in this case, again, you can find when you add the word, okay, when you add this particular ly to this particular word, it's not going to change anything, right? It's a love becomes lovely, but the sound, the pronunciation changes, but the stress remains the same. Even the word child, again, we know that when we read child, the stress is on the first syllable, but when you add children or childish to it, the stress is again on the first syllable only. We don't need to change according to the suffix. No. Again, the word beauty, the stress is on the first syllable. But when we add full to it, that means it becomes beautiful, but the stress is again on the first syllable. So the rule number 6 says that you don't need to change according to the suffix. If you add suffix to it, whether it is inflectional suffix or whether it is derivational suffix, but the stress remains the same. The pronunciation changes, the way you pronounce the word it changes, the sound changes, but the stress remains the same. The where you have to stress, that remains the same. There is no change for the stress. So begin, beginning. So again, you can find that G is getting the amplification, or G is stress in this context. When you say love, so the stress is on more on L, and you can find when you add lovely to it, again the stress is on the L, which is the first syllable. Again, beauty to beautiful, again the stress is on B again. So beautiful. So it's on the stress is on the first syllable. When you pronounce the word child and convert that to childish, again the stress is on C, which is the first syllable. If even if it is in the suffix added to it, again the stress is on the first syllable. So there is no change. So the rule number six says that there is no need to change even though you are adding the suffix to it. What matters here is the stress. The stress you have to apply correctly. So whatever stress you are using for the root word, it will be the same when you add the suffix. So rule number six says this. So these are the various stresses and these are the ways to use the stress. These are six rules, but again we have more rules. We'll learn this in the next coming classes. So with this, I'm going to wind today's session, and please keep in mind that the stress means there are two different stresses: the primary stress and the secondary stress. So keep all this in mind, and we'll see this into the second part of this particular session. Thank you.